Γεια σας φίλοι του Δούρείου Ίππου, θα ακολουθεί μια μικρή συνέντευξη με τον Jeff Butler. Ο Jeff είναι πρώην US Navy SEAL και πρώην στέλεχος της CIA. Έχει πτυχία στη διεθνή πολιτική και στην ιστορία. Και αυτή τη στιγμή εργάζεται ως πυροσβέστης και συγκεκριμένα με το βαθμό του πυραγού. Αν σας αρέσει η συνέντευξη του Jeff και η άλλη δουλειά που έχουμε κάνει, κάντε like και subscribe. Hello Jeff, it's a pleasure having you here with us today.
Hey, I'm very happy to be here. I thank you for having me. It's been a long time since we've talked.
Yeah. We speak we exchanged messages in Twitter, but we haven't speak actually face to face for a long time. You are a Clandestine Service officer, or the Directorate of Operations, as it's called on CIA. What that actually is?
Yeah, so I applied to the CIA coming out of the SEAL community, the Navy SEAL community. And I applied, so the agency is divided up into directorates. There's an intelligence directorate, an operations directorate, a support directorate, a science and technology. They all do different jobs. The directorate of operations, which is where I applied, is in charge of collecting intelligence, mainly human intelligence. And that was what my job was. So it's a clandestine service, meaning you're under some sort of official cover or non-official cover if you work there, and your job is just to collect information that the U.S. government cannot collect through open source intelligence or other means of intelligence like signals intelligence or satellite intelligence. So it's really nuts and bolts of it is it's just getting information from human beings. That's really the whole goal of it. And so I worked in the counterterrorism division, counterterrorism center it's called, of the Directorate of Operations, which is focused obviously on counterterrorism, and spent my whole time in that same directorate while I was there.
What's the difference between your title, Clandestine Service Officer, and a case officer?
There's various ways to come into the agency. You can come in as a direct hire, meaning so you're hired by the agency. You may not even be undercover, even if you're in the DO, and you get hired directly as, say, a staff operations officer in the DO, which is someone that works cases from the desk at headquarters. You can be direct hired as a collection management officer, which is someone that manages the collection reports from a desk, usually at headquarters. You can also come in as what's called a clandestine services trainee, which is essentially everyone that comes in that program goes through the CIA's farm training and clandestine operations training to be a case officer. A case officer at the CIA is someone that handles assets, human assets. So if you were my source, because I wanted to report on Greek expatriate community in England, I would handle you. I could only handle you if I was trained as a CIA case officer. So even though my career field was I chose the CMO track, they call it. I still certified as a case officer and worked as a case officer overseas, as well as a collection management officer overseas and at headquarters. So it's kind of complicated, but only people that have been through the CIA's clandestine case officer training program can work as case officers at the CIA.
Okay. Guys, Jeff has an extensive experience. He was a Navy SEAL. He was in the CIA, but we call him today for comments on the Ukrainian crisis. So hold your fire, because we're going to do a longer interview with Jeff down the line, I hope.
That'd be great.
So my first question, as far as Ukrainian crisis go, I wanted your opinion if there is any validity to the Russian grievances about the expansion of NATO. And I'm asking you because obviously belonging in the CIA, you have an idea of the policy also side of things, I assume.
Yeah, and my undergraduate degree is in international politics and international security studies, so I do have a good background in it. There was a case to be made. They have a legitimate case to make that at the end of the Cold War, when the coup happened and Boris Yeltsin, some of the old guard attempted to overthrow the post-Soviet government, and sort of a gentleman's agreement was, well, NATO's not going to ever be a threat to you, and we'll sort of check our expansion eastward from the countries we already were at that time. We didn't. We did move further east. I don't. Speaking from the point of view of a government official of the U.S. government or former one, I don't think we ever presented a threat to Russia as NATO. It was more of a, it is a collective defense agreement, but there was never, from what my experience, never any sort of offensive posture towards Russia. Now, Russia still didn't like it. I don't think that's their rationale for doing this. I think it was more a Russian rationale of wanting to unite and bring all the Russian people, this idea of a sort of the greater community of Russians that are spread throughout Ukraine and a little bit further west of Russia and Belarus and everywhere under Putin's control. So I think he's kind of using NATO as a straw man to really just want to expand back and take back some of the territory that was lost to him at the end of the Cold War, or lost to Russia. That's my opinion. I'm sympathetic. I am sympathetic to their agreement that they see NATO as a threat in the sense of a competitor, a strategic competitor, but I don't think that justified an invasion westward, in my opinion.
And again, sorry, I'm going on the policy questions because you have all that background. Do you think the power grab we see here now, which is a very expanded war, the likes of which we haven't seen since 70 years ago, really, the capture of a whole country, do you think it's like the right move, given the resistance and the backlash that Russia faces? I mean,
I think it's been a strategic disaster for Russia in the sense that, any goodwill or sort of sympathy they may have had for their point of view, that we're standing up to NATO and, we're doing what was best for Russia, I think has been lost completely, because they are trying to take over an independent country. I mean, that Ukraine became independent in 91, and it was a sort of a big bargain and an agreement that if Russia didn't sign on to formally, they at least acknowledged at the time. And 20 years or 30 years later, you can't go back and say, well, that should never have happened, and now we're taking this country back. I mean, I don't think I think it's been a strategic disaster for Russia.
And to the military side of things, we have seen some soft operations, the attempt of the capture of the airports near Kiev, so they can use it to bring in supplies and all that. What do you make of those operations? Because they are they're quite limited. We don't see it. So what do you make though of those operations? How soft can affect a conventional warfare? How much soft can affect a conventional warfare?
You probably know, having worked for our former employer website, that so many people have this notion of special operations forces as these all powerful, game-changing units, and they can do important things and really magnify an effect based on their small size. But I don't think, absent the conventional forces making satisfactory progress and holding territory and moving swiftly, I don't think they're able to make a big impact, and they haven't so far, if you believe the reporting. They can't do it on their own. I don't know all the details of the raids and things they've tried, but they don't appear to have been successful. And a lot of that is because, you can have soft season airfield, and they might hold that airfield for a couple hours, but the conventional forces, if they're not coming right up to take control of it and fortify it and hold it for the long term, then that soft mission was kind of a waste. And it seems like, that's kind of illustrative of what's been happening there. Maybe they have had some successes, I don't know, but if they have, I don't think they have the conventional rapid movement at this point to be able to seize on and hold those advantages that their soft forces may have gotten for them if they did.
Which brings me to my next question. First of all, how you judge the performance of the Russian army given the last days? I mean, by your experience, how you see them?
I just like you and everybody else only have really open source reporting to go on, but that's a open source today is, as you know, so much bigger and wider variety of sources now to see things, including firsthand video and documentation of what's happening. And it looks like a disaster to me. I mean, it's, the most charitable case I could make for how the Russians have gone so far is that all the forces coming down from the north have been sort of a feint to distract from the real objective, which is maybe securing a land corridor over to Odessa in the south. And they're making progress on that front. But even that is not, they're not holding the cities in the places they conquer. They're not really holding them securely, and in some cases are losing them again after they take them. So I think overall it's been a disaster strategically and tactically in the sense of, I don't know if he committed too few forces, or if he didn't want to overcommit because they wanted to limit the damage, but it just hasn't been enough. It seems like a lot of their air force is being held back in reserve or not being used, and I don't understand that, other than to think maybe they don't want to unleash everything on Ukraine. But at this point, you almost would have to mitigate the stalled assault that they've started.
I saw a good counter argument about the Air Force today. I'm gonna shoot the question in case you have heard anything. So that gentleman, he's an Austrian Air Force analyst and all that. He has extensive bibliography on the whole thing. He says that we judge the Russian Air Force by Western standards. The Russian Air Force doesn't do what the US Air Force does, destroying everything from the battlefront 200 miles behind. They do what they're trained to do, is taking over the battlefront. That's all they do. So I don't know if you have ever heard anything, or you can make a comment on that. But
I haven't heard that argument, but I don't. Even if they're, you would think, I would have to think that at least their primary objective would be to establish air superiority over the battle space, and it doesn't appear they've done that, because there's still Ukrainian surface-to-air batteries operating. There's still Ukrainian planes flying. So I don't know if that's not their basis of success is dominating the skies, then I don't know why they would exist, or what their goal would be then.
What their purpose. I have heard people, and I have read people, that they are shocked by the conduct of the Russian army. Some people have even described it as intelligence failure because the intelligence was so off. Do you accept that, description, or it's a bit harsh?
I don't know. I didn't work. If I had worked the Russia target at the CIA, it would have been the political target. The military intelligence establishment would really have been the analytical office that would have covered Russian status of forces and military posture. So I don't know what their most recent assessments of the Russian military were. I have to believe that everyone, including analysts that were experts or are experts, were taken by surprise at the casualties they've suffered, and just sort of the haphazard logistics setup they have and the slowness of their movement. I have to think everybody's surprised by that, and I don't know why that is, to be honest with you.
Okay, and in the long run, any estimation how the whole thing is gonna play out?
Man, if I had to put money on it today, I think they'll go ahead to Odessa and try to connect over to the Transnistria region in Moldova. And I think that if they can get that locked down, or at least get it secure enough to where they feel like they control it, I think they'll then sue for some sort of agreement. And, their offer will come down to, we'll pull out of the whole country except for this southern corridor we've secured, and that's ours now, and take it or leave it. And I think that's where the negotiating point will start. But that's completely conjecture on my part. A lot depends on what the Ukrainians do, and what the Russians' what Putin's end goals are. If he's determined to take Kyiv and to overthrow the government of Ukraine, then he may not stop until that point.
Which begs the question: given the reaction of the Ukrainian citizens, do you think we're gonna see an insurgency a resistance? In that case, is a resistance like spring up immediately?
I do, yeah. I have to imagine that that will happen organically amongst the Ukrainians and will be supported by Western governments. I would think that's a pretty logical outcome, unless the Ukrainians decide that they're willing to give up, that bottom third of their country, which seems unlikely.
If Russia is successful to cut off Ukraine from the sea, and let's say Ukrainians didn't have a resistance and all that, sanctions and all that reaction from the international community, how difficult will make it that for Putin to hold into power?
Yeah, I mean, that would have to, one would think that would have to be part of a peace agreement, from the Russian perspective would be an easing of those sanctions, because they're crippling at this point. And I think Fitch is predicting a sovereign default in the next couple months. And I mean, they can't sustain that. And so that's leverage that we would have. Whatever agreement ultimately comes out of it, that would have to be part of it from their perspective. So I would think we'd be able to extract some kind of significant concession for them to secure that getting freed from those sanctions.
And a question that I also asked Jack yesterday. We have seen all that very brilliant public relations / propaganda campaign by the Ukrainians. Do you think that was a capability cultivated beforehand, or we just happened to see a very nice improvisation, given the fact that the president is also a professional actor?
Right. I really would not undervalue that point. I think he understands, some innate part of him understands the power of the drama of it all, and the selling of their resistance to the rest of the world to secure for them support. I think that's been an incredible development by him, especially, but really the whole government and the Ukrainian media, is doing a great job of blasting out to the world. You have the Kyiv Independent and a handful, if not more, journalists from Ukraine that are constantly tweeting and just keeping it out there and keeping the struggle out there, and sort of putting out videos that are bolstering the morale of Ukrainians and of the West to stick with them. That's been, to me, a genius on their part. I can't imagine it going any better for them in that regard.
And Jeff, given your experience again, the question is like, if Ukraine falls, if that happens, and they form a resistance, how do you see a program to help that resistance being run? We're going to see some stay-behind programs, which they have already some kind of laws passed for some of the units to be used in that capacity. Sorry, we even gonna see Western advisors on the ground?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is definitely a capability that not just the CIA, but a lot of the Western intelligence services have, is setting up and running those kind of resistance programs, and it's a bread and butter skill of a lot of those agencies, and that really is as simple as representatives of those governments' intelligence agencies embedding in Ukraine with those forces and just helping support them with funds transfers and arms transfers, and really whatever kind of support we can give them, short of ground troops, to include tactical battlefield sort of targeting and communications if they needed, and all the way up to strategic level political guidance. And I would guess mainly they would need material, arms, ammunition, money, and we can definitely help in that regard, and I would guess will in the long term.
Jeff, thank you very, very much for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And as I said, I hope we're going to see you again when you have the time to do the long format interview.
Yeah, no problem. That sounds good.